Chris Matthews spoke to the head of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, and look at the questions that he asks her. See if it's obvious to you where his loyalties lie.
Sanders speak at the Democratic convention, win or lose? You want to have him up there on the stage as a socialist representing the Democratic Party? Do you want him up there?
Bernie Sanders.
Do you want him on the floor of the convention?
Bernie Sanders has been a good Democrat. Caucuses with the Democrats. Of course he should speak.
Speak in prime time.
He should speak at the Democratic National Convention.
In prime time, with everybody watching.
Bernie Sanders represents we are a big tent
So the
party.
answer is yes.
I did. I said yes. I can say yes again.
But in prime time.
I don't know what time he should speak.
Oh, maybe when nobody's watching, you mean?
No, of course Bernie Sanders should speak. He should speak in a slot where the appeal that he has across the board, the progressive, populist message that he has that resonates deeply and widely with the American people, not just with Democrats, absolutely that should be featured. The difference between us and the Republicans is that we really are a big tent party.
What is the difference between a Democrat and a socialist? I used to think there was a big difference. What do you think it is?
The difference between
a Democrat like Hillary Clinton and a socialist like Bernie Sanders.
What's the difference between being a Democrat and being a Republican?
Well, what's the big difference between a Democrat and a socialist? You're the chairman of the Democratic Party. Tell me the difference between you and a socialist.
The relevant debate that we'll be having over the course of this campaign is what's the difference between a Democrat and a Republican?
You see what he's doing there, right? He's showing his true colors. And he's showing how much he adores and loves only establishment Democrats. He was like laughing at the idea of like, should Bernie Sanders speak at the Democratic National Convention? Should he a socialist, an open socialist, should he speak there? What's the difference between a socialist and a Democrat? Tell me. I think there's a big difference. What's the difference? Got to exclude Bernie. I mean, he's not like us. Actually, you know what, Chris? You're right. He's not like you. See, he actually gives a fuck about the American people. That's the difference. What's the difference between one of today's Democrats in the Democratic Party, the elected officials in the Democratic Party, versus Bernie Sanders? Bernie Sanders actually gives a fuck about what he's talking about. Bernie Sanders actually cares and tries to get a minimum wage increase. Bernie Sanders actually gives a shit and tries to increase unionization. Bernie Sanders actually tries to get a single-payer healthcare system. Bernie Sanders actually wants to get out of the wars in the Middle East. Whereas the Democrats, will loosely, kind of, maybe, not really be in favor of those policies. But most importantly, I mean, come on, we're establishment Democrats. We got to play this game in Washington, D.C. where we have to please our donors. That's what it really comes down to. So I'm going to answer Chris Matthews' question. When he says to Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, what's the difference between a Democrat and a socialist? Or in other words, what he's saying is, what's the difference between Hillary Clinton or somebody like that in today's Democratic Party and Bernie Sanders? The difference is Hillary Clinton cares more about pleasing her donors than anything else, and Bernie Sanders cares about actually representing the American people and doing what's right by them and creating a better system. And by the way, let's understand something real quick here. I try to bring this up every time we mention the fact that Bernie Sanders describes himself as a socialist. Socialism is a term where there's various understandings of it. And he's not really a socialist in the strictest, under the strictest, most commonly understood definition of it. Because Bernie Sanders is not somebody who wants to totally upend and scrap the entire capitalist system. Bernie Sanders, to more accurately describe him according to real political science terms, he's a social democrat, which is the same thing that you see, very similar to the systems that they have in Scandinavia. And actually another term to describe that and to describe him is, I know this is terribly politically incorrect to say this term, and people will demonize you for bringing it up, but Bernie Sanders is a welfare statist. And what that means is he's in favor of a hybrid, a mix of socialism and capitalism. He wants to heavily regulate capitalism in the private sector to make sure the abuses don't run wild, and he wants to make sure you have a social safety net there, and certain things, certain industries are off the table and should be socialized, like the obvious ones that we talk about all the time on this show, healthcare, education, things like that. So, Matthews repeatedly calling him as, he's a socialist. He doesn't mean that in a very positive way, and he does try to mean that, and he does say that with the implication that he should be dismissed. that, oh, he's fringe. And by the way, this goes back to why I said from the beginning, I never thought Bernie Sanders should ever refer to himself as a socialist, because you're going to marginalize yourself amongst the establishment, at least, and it's not really accurate because you're more of a social democrat. So, but also just a final thing here. If you actually look at the polling of the American people, they now have a more favorable view of socialism than capitalism, which is fascinating. It's like they understand and they see how capitalism, or more accurately, corporatism, has fucked them over for so long that they're like, we like socialism more. So that's really fucking interesting. And maybe that was part of the reason why Bernie decided to call himself a socialist, even though if he is a socialist, he's a super far right-wing socialist. But I don't want to get any more wonky going into the political science terms. Bottom line is, as you can see there, Chris Matthews, very dismissive of Bernie Sanders because, hey, he doesn't play ball with the establishment. He doesn't play ball with the rest of the Democratic Party. He actually cares about the people first. And, ooh, that's icky. Don't let him speak at the convention, because then the Republicans will be able to attack us easier and call us socialists. And, oh, those cheap political attacks are so effective that we can't fight back against it. So don't do it. Don't make us look radical. Yeah, the only problem with that is Bernie Sanders is not the radical one. The rest of the political system, the establishment Republicans and Democrats, are the radical ones because all they care about are the corporations. Bernie Sanders is the only one that's making sense.